Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging Subscriptions and Marketplaces for Platform Success. I'm Allie McDonald, Senior Editor at MIT Sloan Management Review, and I'll be moderating the event today. Today's program is sponsored by Zuora. Our speaker today is Barry Libert. Barry is a board member and CEO advisor to companies seeking to create exponential growth and value via platform business models. He is also a regular contributor to MIT Sloan Management Review. So we're really looking forward to your presentation today, Barry. Please take it away.
Hi, thank you very much for spending some time with me today. We're going to spend today thinking about how to show me the money, which is basically the economics of a business. What are the best businesses? How do you build the best business? And ultimately, what are the ingredients of best businesses today? And so we'll get started right now. First, a little history. The way I think about the world is that there was a time and a place in which, as we all know it, software began to eat the world. And that was the first thing that happened. And as the world came upon this first instance of the world being flat by a book called Thomas Friedman, that basically connected all of us and increased the ability to connect globally. Software began to eat it. And why that's so important is when we think about a connected world, which was Thomas Friedman in 2005, in 2011, Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz wrote the book Software is Eating the World, which was around 2011, and we've seen the impact of that. But as the world was being eaten by software, as we all know, artificial intelligence began to emerge, and with it, the impact of data, machine learning, and the overall concept of models. So an article was written in the Wall Street Journal by Stephen A. Cohen, which he said, if software eats the world, models will run it. So we move from a flat world that's highly connected to a software eating world where software powers it and data and machine learning running it. Very simple three phases of activity. And although most companies are still stuck in a physical world, the flat, connected, and Model 1 world has begun to win. And how do you know that? Very simply, in 2001, what you see is the physical world in predominance, right? Walmart, Citigroup, Exxon, GE, and only one connected company. If you can believe this, it's Microsoft with only a $365 billion market cap. Roll forward in 2006, it's still a physical world. Microsoft is still present because both Steve and Bill Gates understood the fact that we were going to see the connected world and software was going to exist on every one of our desktops. And even in 2011, it was a physical, but underneath that, the internet is connecting the world. And so by 2016, the world is all green. It's connected by these 5 major companies, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook. And in 2021, the world is completely a connected, model-run, software-enabled world. All of us use Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, or Facebook. But it's not just those 5 companies that have realized that this sort of business model, which is a connected, software-enabled, machine learning-run world, applies just to the best 5. That's not in fact correct. You have Uber and Lyft under the automotive space. You have obviously the technology companies under the retail space. You have eBay and Etsy. In the investment space, ICE is otherwise known as the New York Stock Exchange, right? Or NASDAQ. In the travel world, you have Expedia and healthcare companies. You have Teladoc and education. In real estate, you have Angie's List and CoStar Group. And food, you have Grubhub and Yelp. You get the point. There are these what's called platform businesses everywhere with the same 3 ingredients. And the reason those ingredients are so powerful is because they do something spectacularly well, and that is growth. They allow buyers and sellers to interact with each other. The buyers can find sellers who meet their needs and come back to buyers' wants and needs. And obviously Amazon, as I always said to my wife, wow, they must keep track of us because no matter where we go, boxes keep showing up at my home. So I always said, Ellen, I think Amazon's found us again. And it's not obviously a joke, but in some reality it is. We have made ourselves present to Amazon, and to all of their sellers. That creates more traffic and more engagement, which creates more purchases. But that creates more data and better machine learning models, which allow buyers and sellers to interact with more efficiency. And that allows for more engagement, which creates more choices and better outcomes. It's true in my healthcare online environments. It's true in my retail purchasing environments. It's true in my travel environments. So that's cool that they do that, but it's really not that relevant to you. The question is, how do they do it that you can learn from? And you may all know, and I just want to point out, in today and starting yesterday in Sloan Manager Review, there's an article on exactly this topic, which is how subscriptions and data and analytics and marketplaces all create this brand new model. And this is directly from the article right here, which is platforms have three primary components. They start with a subscription software or a workflow. Think about it for a second. When you go into Netflix or Amazon or Apple, you start by registering into a subscription-based model, whether it's free or fee. Whether you pay for Amazon Prime or Shopify or Spotify, you enter the world by entering into a relationship with the provider. That turns into offering a series of marketplaces, because once they're in relationship with you, they can begin to aggregate sellers that want to interact with you. So once you've expressed, this is the movie I want to see, this is the product I want to buy, this is the hotel I want to stay in, this is the resort I want to go to, this is the car ride I need to take, think about Uber, this is the residence I want to rent, Airbnb. It doesn't make a difference. Once they know what I want, they can aggregate sellers that allow them to put that in front of you, so in the moment your needs are met. From those interactions, data and machine learning models can be created, which allow companies to understand automatically what recommendations and offers should be made to you, rather than a consultant. I'm ex-McKinsey, right? That's an interesting way as a major global consulting firm, the old-fashioned way to make a recommendation. But in today's machine learning data generated world, machines can make those recommendations, so you can go back and at the top of the model, decide what you want to buy, and a set of marketplace or sellers can basically make that offer to you. And let's just look at some examples, how everybody uses the same model. In Amazon, they have subscribers, which are buyers, and sellers, which make offers and choices, along with machine learning models at the top that allow them to anticipate wants and needs of the sellers, not just needs of the buyers, and put the sellers in front of the buyers. And that produces a valuation, whenever I wrote this deck, of about $1.6 trillion. Uber, fantastic. Historically, I had to call up and try to find a cab or wait out on the side of the street. And we all know this example. There are 4 million active drivers. There's 99 million active riders. And these numbers are not accurate as of today. And their valuation is more than 100 billion. And they don't own anything other than the connection points between the drivers and the riders. And that allows them to make new offers like Uber Eats, right? And that valuation is $100 billion. And no black car company was probably ever worth more than $100 million in terms of the number of drivers. And then one of my favorites is Shopify, right? Which is, there's 800,000 merchants. I'm sure it's bigger than that number now, with more than 200 million buyers who are actively acting on the merchants' offers. And that allows Shopify and their app store to create new applications that allow more buyers and more merchants to connect using AI and data to create those set of recommendations. So now we know that the best companies in the world have a certain set of ingredients. Think of 3 ingredients that help them make their cakes. One is a flat world in which they understand they flatten the world into a virtual environment. They've used software to eat it all up, and they've used models now to run it. And they do that in concert, one ingredient with the other. It is not like they've diffused their strategy at all. In fact, it's a new way to think of strategy. It's about business models that are more important than the underlying strategies. And strategies, as I was taught, was more about go-to-market strategies. So what do you do? What are the 3 or 4 steps that you must take in your company to achieve this level of performance, this level of growth, this level of capabilities that allow you basically to build a business that looks like this? And the answers are simple. 1, I don't care what type of company you are, start with, and with B2B or B2C, start with a subscription model. Think, what can I do to be in relationship with my customers or my consumers? It is not a relationship when you're in transaction with somebody. Think about it whether you're dating or married. I'm not in a relationship when I'm dating. I'm happily married after 38 years. It's about relationship, which means I know my customers, which means I'm engaged with them, which was a subscription-based business model, versus every year I need to sell that customer or find that customer again. That doesn't make any sense to me as a customer. I don't want to own anything anymore. I want to have an engagement and subscribe to things and let them take care of everything. Plus, I don't like getting prospected all the time. And I'm sure that's true for you. So I don't care if you're selling clothing or not, you can build a subscription business in almost every activity. Figuring out what the unique value proposition, though, is critically important. Next, once you're in subscription or engagement with your customers, and that's a business model plus software question, you then can begin to understand that it is paternalistic to think you can solve for all of their wants and needs. It doesn't make any sense to me as an ex-McKinsey guy that I should believe that no matter how many people I have at McKinsey, that I can somehow know every single solution and solve all my customer problems. And so in today's world, the best thing you can do is create an open environment of a marketplace, because no matter how big a company you are, it is impossible to serve all of your customers' needs. And if you're really a good fiduciary and you really do care about consumer focus and customer success, then your job is not to fill their needs from only what you have in inventory, but making available to them whatever they need. I know this is sort of hypothetical. I used to say, I'm not sure why McKinsey doesn't offer Bain or BCG services through the McKinsey partners. I know that sounds absurd, but you can now see it in every other industry that a good fiduciary offers everybody services, even their competitor services, to their customer set. Because if you care more about your customer than you do care about your own offerings, then you offer marketplaces of variety of offerings. That could be B2B or B2C. As you begin to understand that marketplaces and subscription are related, they're like right hand and left hand together. And I get the fact that most companies today that are high performing companies are SaaS only companies, but they need to understand that in fact they have supply chains, and they should make those supplier chains available to their customer set. So SaaS companies at the very least can build SaaS plus marketplace, right? But all companies have marketplaces. In fact, all companies at their core are data companies. Now, I accept the fact that most data has been what I call strewn all over the floor. It's not actively instrumented or machined so that the people who are actively wanting to use it, the subscriber of the software or the seller of a marketplace, can access that data to make better decisions. And these are 3 different competencies. People who know how to run software as a service or build subscription business models are normally not data architects or machine learning or artificial intelligence professionals, nor are they marketplace people who can build marketplace or engage in people. These are 3 different competencies in today's world. And building a tech company that is flat or allows the connections across different geographies need to have 3 different competencies: subscription, market, and machine learning, with data at the center. Data as we all know, is the air that we breathe today. And that's critically important because the way I try to explain to boards all the time is it's interesting to me to get a haircut once a month, barely. What's more interesting is I use air every single moment. I have to breathe every day. So you want your businesses to be like air, not like haircuts, right? Haircuts once a year or once a month is not that interesting to customers. Where I'm consuming it every month, it's that critical to me. That is the opportunity to build real value for both the customer, the marketplace, and the company who is sitting at the intersection of all of this by providing the data and intersections that matter. These are more businesses about community and connection than they are about transaction and product and service. Now, I'm an old white guy now. I never thought I'd be here one day, and sad to say I am. What's really important is something I learned way back when. It's easier to change your leaders than to change your leaders, which means change management is hard. And having done this for about 35 years and writing for MIT for a long period of time about change management, mental models, all of our mental models are very, very difficult to alter. And so although I might like the looks of everybody in this picture, and hopefully they're older than I am, basically, except for the women, which I'm thrilled about, I don't think they're going to get what I just said. And so therefore, starting from the top, which is changing out the leaders of an organization, especially boards, is critical to this. Because what I find is my management teams are ready to do this almost uniformly because they live in the platform economy. They understand that engagement and experience is more valuable than product and service. So it's easier to change your leaders than to change your leaders, because changing people is a very difficult process. And so when someone doesn't get it, my view is you do the best you can to upskill them and to help them see the world differently. But as we've seen around the world today, change is just a difficult thing. The third thing is measuring what matters. If you don't measure it, you don't manage it. If you don't manage it, you don't value it. And why that's so important is that oftentimes my companies will only measure financial results. Well, in a marketplace and consumer engagement world, you need to start with the end in mind, which is start measuring first the number of people you have in your lower left triangle, which is the number of subscribers, then the number of people in the marketplace, and then the amount of data. Because if you think about building a community-based flat organization in terms of flat world organization, the size of your community is the critical component. It's the North Star of what you're trying to build. Engagement is second most important if you do acquisition of a relationship, and then keeping or retention that customer. And you can only do that if you build a subscription, marketplace, and database business model. Otherwise, you lose them. And a way to think about this is, what is the thing you care most about? In the lower left corner, you care about the number of subscribers that you have, how engaged they are, how active they are, how often they refer others to your business, right? In the marketplace, you think about how many sellers do you have? What's the amount of gross merchandise value that they're selling through your business? Are they engaged? Do they care? Have you engaged them in a meaningful conversation? Are they as active and committed to your business as they are to themselves so that they can meet your subscribers' needs? Data. Are you collecting data and instrumenting it? That means, are you coding it so it can be reused again to be trained and for you to train machines on it? Because if you don't collect the data and organize it and cleanse it, machines can't learn anything on it. Machines are just like humans. They learn in a structured and unstructured way by observing data and seeing the patterns. And so you need to basically collect large amounts of data, on a variety of different both transactions, activities, and participants. And you need to organize it in a way in which it can be recognized in patterns. So I'm obviously a pattern, a series of actions I take every day, and those patterns are recognizable by the companies with which I interact. Otherwise, simply said, the music, which is Spotify, that I get recommended on Friday and Mondays, Spotify would not know those are my listening habits, and Kayak would not know where I travel to. And lastly, in terms of growth and value, you want to go from thinking linear, gee, I'm growing at 5 or 10 or 15%, to where you're thinking about growing at 100%. I know people are surprised by the fact that people like Amazon, who can do hundreds of billions of dollars a year of revenue, can still grow at 35% or 45% a year. And the reason they can is because the more subscribers they have, the more sellers that they can put on their platform, the more data they generate, the more exponential the value they can create. Now, what does that mean in terms of the next level of detail? Well, very simply stated, when you're running a SaaS or subscription business, you want to measure your annual recurring revenue. What are you generating in terms of recurring revenues that you can count on? The great thing about subscription businesses are, if you do a great job, more than 80%, if not 90% of next year's revenues are known or at the end of the year. Now that makes next year really exciting, given the year's backlog of revenues are known already. And that's why investors like these types of businesses so much. But they compound upon each other when you have a marketplace. And GMV is gross merchandise value. In this case, if sellers are using your platform to interact with your subscribers, then you, just like Apple, think about Apple's App Exchange, you get the benefit of the fact that merchandise, in their case, Apple has got a huge marketplace of Apple iOS, which is apps that you download on your phone. And apps basically, the app people get about 70% of the revenues, and Apple gets about 30%. And same thing for Google. And so these companies, as they allow their sellers to merchandise their products and services through their marketplace, they have what's called a take rate. And take rates can vary between 20 and 30% for good companies and lower for commodity companies. But the example is, think of it as a commission or a royalty. They're now called take rates and gross merchandise value. So once you engage and acquire a customer and you keep that customer, which is critically important to your sellers, so they can basically sell again to them, you get a percentage of the gross merchandise value that are being generated through your marketplace. That turns into the next component part, which is your machine learning models. The more subscribers you have, which generates the more or the larger number of consultants or sellers you have, it generates increasing amounts of data that can be turned into patterns that machine learning models, artificial intelligence, can recognize. And from that, intelligence can be created or recommendations can be created. And that recommendation engine can be used to help two people. The sellers, they want to know, what should I be putting in your virtual store? You know, music with musicians or artists for concerts. What should I be putting forward to your subscribers? And from a subscriber or customer perspective, they only see things that they want to see and they want to discover. It's not like walking into a department store or a food store and having to basically walk the whole store to find what it is that is only interesting to you. The result of the first three ingredients, again, is exponential growth and exponential profits and exponential opportunities. And there's a variety of dimensions of exponentiality that we care about. One is, very simply, obviously to investors, it's exponential growth. But for employees, it's exponential development opportunities. There is more growth for me as a human in a company that's growing quickly and exponentially versus a company that's growing slowly and has little or no growth prospects. Not just in terms of my compensation, but in terms of my personal development. And it's the same thing exponentially for consumers and subscribers. They get exponential choices. Think about Netflix, right, or Amazon Prime versus the old days of ABC or NBC or CBS. In these services now have exponential choice. I didn't even realize that my wife and I liked movies from Scandinavia. We can't even speak the language. But now through what's called the long tail, we can watch things we didn't even know we enjoyed, let alone speak the language. And that means think about the producers of those movies. They can now target me, and they couldn't even reach me at the local movie theater. So there's exponential growth and opportunity on all dimensions from this model. Now, you might say, very simply, how do I get started? And I'm going to say the following. Today is Thursday. Monday will happen for all of us. And there's no time better than today to get started. And that is to simply assemble a team. Ask yourself 3 questions. Can we build a subscription business? Can we build a SaaS business? 2, and if we can't, what can we do to make sure we engage with our customers all year long so think of us as their fiduciary? 2, who in our supply chain, if we don't have a marketplace, could we put in front of our customers once they enter our workflow? Now think about something as simple as Salesforce, right? They have an app exchange, but think about once you do CRM or any sort of workflow in their environment, or SAP or Microsoft, there's always a question someone has: how can somebody help me with this? So no matter what business you're in, there's always an opportunity for a marketplace, because every business needs to fulfill the wants and needs of their customers. Now you can let that, what's called waterfall, go to somebody else, but I highly recommend you think, wow, how can I fulfill not just the need in front of me that my SaaS customers want, but with a marketplace of providers, any type of providers, whether it be college admission providers or strategic consultant providers, or for that matter, software providers, right? And a lot of these are in our article that you can read, right, which is how to win at this platform game. There is a variety of different types of case studies there, which say, who can I put in front of them to help them achieve their goals? Getting into college, fulfilling a business solution, finding a car. It does not make a difference. Who can I put in front of them to help them meet their needs? And then the third question is, what data am I generating, or could I be generating, that I can instrument and machine so I have intelligence? And think very simply in the consultant model, doctor model, medical model, what procedures or services am I providing from which I can get a feedback loop that allows me to inform what type of consultants I need, what type of doctor specialties do I require, what type of care do I put forward, and what are the outcomes that I generate through my marketplace and the SaaS? Because that will allow me to do a better job next time, no matter what part and where I start. And here's the bottom line. You can start as a data provider, move to marketplace or SaaS, or start as a SaaS company, move to marketplace and data, or start anywhere and move any place. As long as you think comprehensively about the fact that we live in a platform world where the world is flat, software is eating it, and machine models are running it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Barry, for the insightful presentation. And we have so many questions from our audience, and luckily we have a lot of time that we can now work through some of our questions. I'm actually going to put my camera on, and Barry, you can join me. All right, so I'm doing great. So we're getting a lot of questions from the presentation. And one area that I would love to go back to was our older group of leadership, our leadership team. And there's a lot of questions about mindset. So not just in change, but also in, rising leaders or people who are, developing their own businesses. They're, setting these types of strategies. What do you think is the most important frame of mind, mindset change that needs to be happening for people to really move from legacy models into this model that you're talking about?
So you and I had this conversation a while back, Allie. So the way I think about businesses are, we grew up in a paternalistic society, and that is profoundly still true, right? A male paternalistic society, in which I believe, this is not true for me, I believe as a company that I can fill your wants and needs. I mean, it's really sort of a crazy thesis, because I can tell you that if you're speaking to my wife, she would say, Barry cannot fulfill all my wants and needs. And so if you think about it from a maternalistic perspective, the reality is that if you surround it from a mental model perspective, you begin to think, gee, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the people. I don't have all the products and services. I don't have all the insights. Once you think that way, that is, I'm a meditator, you think, gee, it's called a beginner's mind. I'm going to think about, how do I surround people with the wants and needs they have from others? That to me is the most important thing, that I can fulfill your need, but not me individually as a leader, through the integration of others that have the expertise. And for companies, that's really hard to think, oh my God, you're asking me to invite my competitors or other suppliers and I won't be able to control their quality. That's where boards get really stuck, where it's going to be too much risk and it's not going to meet compliance standards. Well, we've seen Apple, Amazon, and Spotify and Shopify all hurdle those compliance issues. So I think anybody can do that at any time they want.
Yeah, I love that. I really like this idea, and I think there's a certain amount of like you said, kind of vulnerability of shifting to a place where you might be inviting competitors into your marketplace, or changing sort of the model you had before, but in order to serve customers and ultimately maybe to serve your employees in a better way too. And I've mentioned this idea in the past, and I really like it, and wondered if you could expand upon it for our audience, of how this model creates empathy at scale and what that means in terms of matching the needs of your users with data and with a subscription marketplace model.
Correct. The reason I think about this is an empathetic model. It's really important to me. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think it's empathetic when I presume that I have the answer for you. I think that's far from empathetic. And so from the perspective that when you think about empathy at scale, one cannot know people at scale. It's impossible. I barely can know my family and my friends, which, maybe in numbers, tens. When you get to millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions, in this case now people are doing billions of consumers, the only way you can know that is by being empathetic, which is to be in relationship with them, which is to begin to use information to help them achieve their goals, which is a very empathetic perspective. And that's true for employees as well. I think about the work from home experience now. There'd be no way, as you and I talked about, Sally, there'd be no way, this is going to change the way that we work as well. There'd be no way without COVID we would have a work from home reality. The good news is, if you said to employees, rather consumers, you must come to a store to shop. This is what most companies do. You must come to a store to shop, my store to shop. That doesn't make any sense. Well, the fact that we say to employees they must come to work, it means it's about as unempathetic and uncaring as I can imagine, right? It seems to me we should treat people, which are both consumers, employees, investors, are all, Allie and Barry are just two people. We are all, Allie, Barry, are in fact consumers, employees, and investors in our own lives. We're not one or the other. We should be able to have the right to work from home, right to buy at home, right to basically invest from home, just like we have the right to go to work, go to the right to go to the store, and go to the right to invest. Those should be part of the empathy at scale by using data to inform decisions of what's right for Allie may or may not be right for Barry. So that's why I think about this as an empathetic model.
That's really great. And just going off of the COVID, we had a question that came in from an audience member about the impact of COVID. So you mentioned, kind of readying your supply chains as part of, steps into moving towards this model. One question, one part of the question is, do we feel that, supply chains have sort of normalized since COVID, or will be subject again to sort of, vulnerability there? And do you have examples of how COVID has either supported or challenged this model and framework? Are there companies that really show the resilience of this through COVID, or are there weaknesses that might still need to be worked out?
Fantastic set of questions. In fact, there's multiple questions there.
3 questions, yeah.
Here's my view about supply chains. I think that's an antiquated way of thinking about that, right? If you really think it's buyers and sellers, they're really just sets of customers in today's world. They're both customers, right? I don't really like the idea of buyers and sellers, right? Especially when you use supply chain. It would suggest somehow that a supply chain is subservient to the buy chain, right? And I think of it completely differently, which is that they're both sets of customers. They both have sets of needs. And the truth of the matter is their needs are one and the same, which is to connect and engage with each other on providing and buying a set of service. And as customers become suppliers, like I'm involved with a company which is a Python company called Anaconda, in which the developers are the customers, which is Python developers are the customers, are the companies. It's hard to differentiate what the supply chain is and what the buy chain is. Facebook's another example. Am I a supplier or buyer, consumer and advertiser? I have no idea anymore. So I do think that the traditional supply chains are increasingly at risk. They're too rigid and haven't thought of themselves as being customer centric and being in connection with customers. They're letting somebody else be in relationship with the end user. That's a problem, right? Because if you think about your relationships at home, you would never want to go through another person to be in relationship with your partner. You would just never do it. Your friend, your family members, you want to have direct communications. So the old thesis of supply chains, the way they're currently organized, which is they're letting somebody else have the consumer or customer relationship, is just a bad idea. And therefore they become too rigid and too structured, and COVID has disrupted them, right? What happened is, if you look at the research from McKinsey, COVID has been the great accelerator of today's platforms, because the supply chains didn't have the digital wherewithal and the relationships to prosper during this difficult time. That created, hopefully this is the third part of that answer, that created for supply chains this huge upheaval we're seeing right now. I do think it will stabilize as we get back to more stable environments. But the transfer of wealth and value has happened. And that's a problem for supply chains. They weren't digitally enabled, they didn't have data at their core, and they didn't have relationships. So if I were running a supply chain company now, I would be saying to my company, we got to get consumer centric, and everybody's a direct consumer brand. Otherwise, it wouldn't be advertised to by the pharmaceutical giants every day. Hope I answered that.
Yes. No, I think you did. That's really helpful. And and for our audience, Barry and I have worked on several articles together, so I have a lot of prior knowledge of some of the topics that we've been walking through in this piece, but in this presentation. But it's great because I'm seeing some questions come through that I think some of your other articles speak to. So we can definitely make sure to reference all of Barry's work this over the past year in our email to the audience, which we'll be sending out in a couple days. One question that does come up is this idea of like, where is the limit for what kind of company can actually do this? Like, you could be an amazing brand. You could be McDonald's and be known for your burgers. You could be Coca-Cola and be known for your soda. Are you going to be able to move into a marketplace model if you are known for something, like some good that is one sort of area that you just do really well? Or is that a limited form of thinking?
Yeah, I think that's limited. I've been doing this for 35 years. My first board opportunity was AT&T in 1995, and they kept telling me that they were a network, and I keep telling them they were not. They were a ping and pipe company, and people may not know this. AT&T went bankrupt. It's really Southern Bell now. I have a thesis that everybody can do this, literally. We all get served by different, I mean, Amazon does not meet all my needs, I want to be clear. Neither does Apple, neither does Shopify or Spotify, they don't. I have a ton of other needs, we all have other needs. And all those other needs should be satisfied, and increasingly are, by this type of business model. And that would allow every company to prosper and their partners to be more in connection with, and more in relationship with, and more empathetic with their, I'll say both their sellers and their buyers, right? I'll just say both sides of the equation. And I think it's an and, not an or. So that my answer to all companies that are legacy companies is you can do this. I'm not suggesting you should throw away the past, I'm not. I think this is an amplification to what it is you're already doing. And it is critically important for everybody's future to understand these new ways of working, because whether we like it or not, the best companies now are such a big part of our lives that we have to play this game to be successful.
That's great. And we also had questions along the lines of prioritization. So your example of Uber expanding into a new category. They went from just matching riders to drivers, getting from one place to another, to suddenly they can pick up your food. And how well timed was it for them to have that when they were entering a pandemic where less people were going out, but certainly more people needed food delivered. But how can companies be thinking about these types of decisions, whether it's expanding into a new category or more of a partnership model? That's something that's been coming up in the questions about different types of marketplaces and how businesses go about prioritizing where to invest their strategy and time.
Spectacular question. So every company needs to decide, is it a build, buy, or partner question, right? And most companies have a tendency to build, right? And the way they build new competencies is through acquisition. Many partner as well, right, to get new competencies. And my real answer to these questions are, you need to evaluate every one of those opportunities for market expansion in that shape and form. However, I think if you think marketplace first before you build by partner, then you begin to see the opportunities. I want to give two quick examples. This morning we had a meeting at my home with a management team that I help, and it happens to be in the college recruiting space. And what we realize is that as we build relationships with consumers, which is high schoolers going to college, should they partner with colleges? My answer to them back is, they knew this, they're not going to build a college, right? So helping high schoolers get into college, they're not going to build colleges. But when they think internationally, there are a variety of partners they can make that bring international students to colleges, right? And there are a variety of different partnership opportunities in the finance vertical, helping people, students get right financial aid. That's a partnership model versus a build model, right? When they start offering things like, I'll call it Bitcoin, which is paying for colleges, they need to partner with somebody. So there's a variety of build, buy, and partner opportunities. And it's the same thing in the consultative world. I'm on another board that's in the article, in which a company's called Catalent, in which they have to both, in case they're a 100% marketplace company, in which they have various different types of strategic consultants helping a variety of different companies. As they move to new markets, they can both buy, I'll call them communities of consultants, right? They can put on their marketplace. They can partner with consulting firms that want to be in their marketplace, and or they can build those competencies internally. So I think constantly you have to manage always the build, buy, partner circumstance, because you're trying to fulfill the entire breadth and depth of your customers' needs. And you have to ask, what's the fastest way of getting there?
That's great. And so in terms of how that is happening, what function in the business is really owning that idea of monitoring where we are, whether it's build or partner, who owns that?
Great question. Again, it depends on the companies that I've seen, right, over the last 30 years of doing this stuff. Companies that have marketplace functions, there's normally someone in the marketplace area in that function and their go-to-market strategy that is already thinking about what new capabilities does my marketplace need to fulfill my consumers' needs. Where there is no marketplace function, they normally have a chief marketing officer who has always known that they have a slew of needs that are not being fulfilled by them to their consumer. So in that case, where they are making or marketing or selling something, it's normally the chief marketing officer who's saying to me, Barry, oh my God, there's so much demand that we could fulfill if we had a marketplace. This is where I'd like to start, right? And then where they're a SaaS company, there's normally somebody in what I'll call customer success. You can see it's all over the organization because they're not organized this way. There's somebody in the CX organization because they're trying to keep the customer engaged. They don't want the customer to roll off the SaaS platform. They're always constant contact with the customer saying, oh my gosh, if I only had this, if I only had that, Barry, you have no idea how much happier my customers would be. So I'm sorry, there's not a universal answer, but you can see it depends on the age and the stage of development of the company that where they are in the journey.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And we had another question come in from someone, and I thought this was interesting because I work on I work on a lot of articles about data and data quality, and a lot of legacy companies have legacy data. They don't have great, what we would consider maybe pristine sort of AI ready data. And the problem there is in having poor data that you feed into models, you're suddenly going to be creating decisions or algorithmic choice making will be happening with data that isn't really primed and ready. So there's an example of a company that probably has to do some like pre-work in a way, or kind of shore up a certain leg of the stool in a sense before this can really be working effectively. Have you seen examples of that where companies really need to sort of audit different areas before they can pursue things? I could imagine too, a company not having a really robust customer service team or a people experience team for retention and all churn, all of those types of things. How do companies need to be thinking about not just let's do this, but are we ready for it?
So I see all the time. I see SaaS companies. I mean, in the 35 years I've gone from seeing no SaaS companies to software companies that are on premise to software that's in the cloud. I mean, to SaaS. I mean, I see that all day long. Increasing, I see marketplace companies, whether it started with, I used to work for some really big marketplaces that are traditional on-prem marketplaces, whether it be Neiman Marcus I used to work for, to, on today's real live online marketplaces. I've seen that. I don't see a lot of data companies that are data native, machine learning native. I rarely see it. And even in my good software companies, they have no data. They really have no data teams. They have data teams that keep track of who the consumer is, but they don't have a data team that we're talking about, or a machine learning team in which there's I'll say a dedicated team with machine learning experts building models to run a business. I rarely see that because that's not how the companies were architected. So if you have to start from scratch, what I would suggest is you start from scratch. You don't try to clean things you have, which were built for another age. And let me give you a real example. I have an autoimmune condition. I have to go to Partners, which is Mass General. I said, who else has my condition? And they said to me, Barry, what do I know? We use Epic software to collect monies from the insurance companies to basically reimburse your cost of healthcare. We don't know who else has your problem in this particular very large healthcare system. You would suggest we would have to know the patient well, other than knowing your name. And don't forget, when you go to a hospital, they normally ask you 6 times, Allie, how old are you? What's your birth date? What's your social security number? And within 10 minutes of each time, right, by reading it on your wrist. So what I try to tell companies is start from scratch. Think about if you were de novo. Forget the fact that the company exists. What would you want to know? How would we begin to build out that data set of what it is we are already interacting with our customers about, or suppliers, and then work backwards before you start trying to clean up what you have, which may not be valuable in the first place. Start de novo, think about what the data cube looks like, what you would like to be able to have pattern recognition about, and then once you've proven the model, then you can work backwards for what data you have, which is relevant to where you're going.
No, I think that's really helpful, and I love all of your examples. I think they kind of bring this all to life. To switch gears a little bit, we have a couple questions that touched on an example from your presentation that I personally, and I think I gave you some pushback on this previously, is this idea of, in a world where a McKinsey might offer the services of a BC and a BCG or Bain, how do you assess the cost benefit analysis for services versus products, and how would it be profitable? And I know we're not necessarily specifically talking about this, but your point is to really be expanding our view and to be thinking much more creatively than maybe ever before about this type of model. But how can a business be profitable in this by doing this?
I had a series of conversations with the recently departed, or the prior recently departed McKinsey chairman. And he would say, Barry, you're killing me. You're giving away the answers using machine learning and what business models look like. Don't you realize we make a lot of money just doing assessments? We charge $1 million to $1.5 million a month for a small consulting team. I go, really, you think that's a good business model? I mean, I'm not so sure that works. But yeah, for you guys, it works great. But for the world, it doesn't work well. It just doesn't. And he said, you really would suggest that I really open up my platform the way Goldman Sachs has opened up their platform, or Morgan Stanley's opened up that platform. I go, I really do recommend you open up your platform, because you may not have the people at McKinsey I need, but if you really want to serve me, BCG or Bain might, and you can make money the following way. You can do exactly what Apple does or Amazon does. You can take 30% of the take. And the good news is, for those people who are on the bench at BCG or Bain, they can basically work through McKinsey. And McKinsey, therefore, looks like a fiduciary. It doesn't look like a sell-side consultant. I mean, he hated that. What do you mean? We're not sell-side consultants. I go, you absolutely are sell-side consultants. All you are doing is selling your stuff. That's a sell-side consultant. And in the financial services world, we know you don't have credibility when you're a sell-side consultant. You're only selling what you have in inventory. Now, that's why we have consultant fatigue in the world, because everybody knows it's sell-side consultants. So the answer is, you have to open up your mind to the fact that although this seems really foreign, I know Ali's going to call me one day and say, you won't believe it, Barry. Maybe not McKinsey, Bain, or BCG, but Deloitte is offering KPMG and PwC and EY stuff, and they're doing it under a private label department. I'm going to make that up, but someday she'll call me and say, you won't believe what I saw recently. These crazy people must have been sitting on on this event. And so I think the good news is that the world's opening up. I mean, surely you see it. It closes down for every action is a reaction. We're seeing this in America now. You see the reactionary activities when you start opening up the world. People want to shut us down again. And I'm not saying that negatively, possibly. People get nervous, right? And so you need to think expansively about, what can I do? Who can I work with? Where can we try something very small to begin with in terms of partnering with our competitors, which is co-opting, and doing that in a collaborative way so we can both go to market and both win.
I love that. And I love that you brought in the example of the chairman here, because there is a question earlier about how to influence people on boards, how to influence at the upper level to really see the future here. And as someone who works with a lot of boards, I'm sure you have many ideas. So I thought that would be a good question for you.
Yeah, so I've worked for boards for the last 35 years, fairly unsuccessfully in the last 25 of 35 years, because most boards said, you're out of your mind, but we're not doing any of this stuff. I mean, I've known MIT for a long time, as Ali will tell you. And most people thought it was completely nuts that you would open up networks and open up marketplaces and let other people compete and participate. And there's been plenty of articles written about this stuff for probably 35 years, but it's becoming reality due to the internet. Things are happening and due to the way the world operates. And Tom Friedman called it, we said the world's flat. The only thing I've learned about boards is it's all about the money. That's the reason I started with that quote, show me the money. And if boards can understand, I mean, when in Rome, you have to speak, you have to speak Roman, right? Whatever it is, Latin. You can't speak another language, right? Boards speak in the language of money. It's what they know, that and risk, right? That's the only two languages they know. And the way you have to think about boards is to say to them, hey, this is a better economic model. We don't have to use our balance sheet to create these new offers. We don't have to use our people to create these new offers. We don't have to use our marketing to create these new offers. We can do this in partnership with others. most of them will say, show me the money, literally, show me the money, show me how that works. And so you have to start small to show them there is money to be made with using a standard Apple model, which is 30% of the revenues, it's called take rate, 30% of the revenues that we generate to our customers from offering other people's products. And they go, how do you know about the quality? That's called risk or compliance. And you need to have a team, just the way Apple does, that makes sure that the products you put in front of your customers are up to your brand standard. And that's part of the journey, which is making sure there's risk management, not just reward management in this journey. And I think what I've learned more recently is once boards understand the risk and the reward, both sides of it, and they know someone's taking responsibility to make sure they don't have more risk than they have reward, they're willing to experiment. And that's great news in today's world for the legacy companies.
That is great news. And I think we did get a lot of questions in here, but I think we've covered a lot of ground. And one last question to kind of wrap our session that I think would be interesting to hear from you is just we are in such an interesting place now. A lot of the world is moving into a reopening. Business, like economies are recovering and kind of coming out of a long stretch of downturn from the pandemic. And what are you seeing signs of excitement or things that are exciting to you in this space with subscriptions, with platform businesses, with marketplaces that make you excited for the future?
So, in the last 10 years, and I say this with all good accord to my friends who are my age, for the last 10 years ago, I only worked for peers of mine, which means they were in the 50s, I was in my 50s, down in my 60s, they were in their 60s. But in the last 3-4 years, the average age of my boards and leadership teams have started to drop. So, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, they were in their 50s. More recently, my management teams are in their 30s, and they are such exciting companies, I cannot tell you. And this morning, I had a company called College Fund at my house. They're in their 20s. And I'm on another board called Reps. They're in their 20s, right? And I look at these people and I go, holy mackerel, our future is right here in front of us. And they're going to be our future. They have this pervasive and open mind. They have an understanding about where the world's going. They're inclusive and empathetic. They understand the power of gender diversification and race diversification. And although I do think, gee, old white guys still run the place, I'm hoping to God, and Allie knows this from me, that the future is a women's world. And Allie's heard me say that before. So, that's my conclusion. And so businesses that understand that, I think, are going to be more empathetic, more inclusive, more gender neutral. And I just think we're for a better future than we were in the past.
Well, that's a wonderful note to close on. So I'm going to move us into our final wrap-up slides. Thank you again, Barry, for that very robust Q&A session. So this concludes our today's Q&A. I've enjoyed my time with you all today. Thank you so much to our audience for your engagement and for your very sharp questions. Thank you to our speaker, Barry Libert, for such a wonderful presentation, and sincere thanks to our sponsor, Zora. Have a wonderful day, everyone.